Hey everyone, welcome back. So for all you medical students out there gearing up for clinicals or your board exams, you know exactly how overwhelming urogenital presentations can get. It all just kind of blurs together, right? Well, today we're fixing that. In this rapid-fire explainer, we're taking raw clinical microbiology notes and building an ironclad mental framework for diagnosing abnormal urogenital discharge. Let's get right into it.
Okay, quick look at our roadmap for today. We'll hit classifying abnormal urogenital discharge, then STI versus non-STI causes, followed by Candidiasis agent and risks, clinical features and exam findings, and finally, the investigation and treatment plan.
Starting right off with part 1, classifying abnormal urogenital discharge. All right, to build our core clinical algorithm, we need to separate vaginal and urethral discharge into 3 really distinct, easily recognizable categories. We're basing this entirely on physical appearance and odor. So we've got our curdy white branch, our foul-smelling fish branch, and our mucopurulent branch. Honestly, memorize this 3-part structure right now. It is literally the master key to unlocking this entire differential.
Now, let's map these out to specific pathogens and patient groups to build up that differential. A curdy white discharge in females, that points us straight to candidiasis, or vaginal thrush. A foul-smelling fish discharge, again in females, points to either Trichomonas vaginalis or bacterial vaginosis. But here is the absolutely vital clinical distinction. Think about that third category. Mucopurulent discharge, which is linked to gonorrhea and chlamydia, is the only category here explicitly noted for both males and females. That's a massive clinical clue you've got to keep in your back pocket.
Moving on to Section 2, STI versus non-STI causes.
So put yourself in the clinic for a second. A female patient presents with a foul-smelling fish discharge. You've got to ask yourself, does this automatically mean she has an STI? Do you need to immediately start contact tracing and treating her sexual partners? I mean, that's a high-stakes question, right? It can cause a whole lot of anxiety for the patient sitting right across from you.
Well, the short answer is no, it doesn't automatically imply an STI. If that fishy discharge is caused by Trichomonas vaginalis, then yeah, for sure, that is an STI. But if it's bacterial vaginosis, it is explicitly not an STI. It's just a disruption of the normal vaginal microbiome. And similarly, the curdy white discharge of candidiasis, also clearly marked as not an STI. You absolutely must explain this clearly to your patients so you don't cause any unnecessary panic.
And here's why getting this right matters so much for your board exams and, honestly, your future patients. The complications. If you miss a mucopurulent STI, like gonorrhea or chlamydia, the pathogen can ascend. In females, this leads to pelvic inflammatory disease, or PID, which is a major threat to future fertility. In males, it can cause acute epididymal orchitis, which is an incredibly painful and serious condition. So yeah, the stakes for getting this algorithm right are just incredibly high.
All right, Section 3, Candidiasis, agent and risks. The primary causative agent you've got to memorize for vaginal thrush is Candida albicans. Now, remember, unlike the bacteria and parasites we were just talking about, Candida albicans is a fungus. And what's wild is that it's actually a normal part of the human flora in small amounts. But under the right or, well, the wrong conditions, it multiplies super fast into an opportunistic infection.
So what exactly are those conditions? We have 5 main risk factors, and they all basically tell a story of vulnerability. Number 1 is post-antibiotic use. Why? Because antibiotics wipe out the protective, normal bacterial flora, like lactobacillus. That completely messes up the vaginal pH and basically gives the Candida fungus free real estate to overgrow. Then we've got diabetes mellitus, because excess glucose literally feeds the yeast. An immunocompromised state means the body's natural defenses are down. And finally, pregnancy and oral contraceptive pills. Both of these alter estrogen levels, which pumps up vaginal glycogen stores, and once again, perfectly feeds that Candida albicans.
Let's move into Section 4, clinical features and examination.
Clinically speaking, this is where you play detective. You're looking for a very specific combo here. A history revealing one of those risk factors we literally just went over, say she just finished up some amoxicillin for a sinus infection, paired with the primary complaint of that hallmark curdy white vaginal discharge. A lot of the classic textbooks call this a cottage cheese-like appearance, and honestly, it is a massive flashing neon sign for candidiasis.
When you actually proceed to the physical examination, or OE as you'll see in the source notes, you're going to observe signs of vaginitis. The mucosal tissue isn't just going to look normal under all that discharge. It presents as visibly inflamed, reddened, fissured with tiny cracks, and sored.
It is intensely uncomfortable for the patient, which totally explains the localized pain and severe itching they'll be reporting to you.
And finally, Section 5, Investigation and Treatment Plan.
The management algorithm here is refreshingly simple. It breaks down into 2 super effective steps. First, you analyze a swab of the discharge under a microscope to lock in the diagnosis. And second, you administer targeted, rapid-acting pharmacotherapy to knock out the overgrowth.
For that investigation step, microscopy is absolutely key. When you, or the lab tech, look through that lens, you are hunting for specific fungal structures. The slide is going to explicitly reveal hyphae or mycelium. If you see those classic branching, filamentous fungal structures on a board exam question or in the lab, boom, you have locked in your diagnosis. You've confirmed it's fungal beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Which brings us right to treatment. Since this is a fungal infection, antibiotics are completely useless. In fact, like we said earlier, they probably caused it in the first place. Instead, you're going to prescribe an antifungal. Our clinical notes specifically highlight clotrimazole, which you probably know by the brand name Canesten. This is a targeted treatment, and amazingly, it's administered as a single dose via per vaginal pessary. So it delivers the medication directly to the site of the inflammation.
Now, I want you to lock this number into your memory right now. Literally sear it into your brain for your pharmacology quizzes, 500. The exact dosage for that highly effective single once-off clotrimazole pessary is 500 milligrams. That's it. Just 500 milligrams one time directly at the site to reset the patient's flora.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final real-world clinical thought. You've done the microscopy, you spotted the hyphae, and you prescribed the 500 milligram clotrimazole. You've successfully treated the thrush. But given everything we just talked about regarding the broader algorithm, STIs versus non-STIs, the dangers of mucopurulent discharge, are you absolutely ready to guarantee nothing else is hiding in that differential? Because remember, patients can definitely have more than one issue at a time. Always keep the whole algorithm in mind. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Keep studying hard, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.